What a wonderful performance from Dr. Stutsky. We'll now be going to panel 3 called The Otherings, looking at the power conflicts using the metaphor of the zombie apocalypse.
Yes, so I am Carolyn Zeppa, and I'm a doctoral student at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I study criminal justice, criminology, and public policy, and most prevalently in policing. So I would say that I moonlight as a zombie scholar, which I think is appropriate for zombies. But just to give you a little bit more on my background, before coming to academia, I actually worked in Los Angeles in screen and television development. So I worked with screenwriters as a researcher and to help develop their ideas. So today I'm really here to kind of offer you a critical look at zombie media that doesn't not sort of from the perspective of what happens after the disaster, but what kind of themes are being brought to us in zombie media that we might need to be concerned about. So essentially, I'm basically saying you shouldn't be fearing the zombies of The Walking Dead, but perhaps some of the broader themes that are being brought forth by creative entertainment industry folks that are making decisions based on economics of their business, and also their assumptions of white privilege perspective. So in that sense, what I fear most from zombie media is more that it creates a justifiably expendable surplus population. So that's what I find concerning about zombie media. So these major themes that I see in what is out there today would be a racialized xenophobia, which would find its origins in the cultural roots of zombies being from colonial Haiti, and that was an enslaved population that revolted and then saw their economic downturn by removing themselves from the colonial system. But we see a lot of that xenophobic and racist fear from that history. And also looking at zombies from the biopolitics of Foucault and Agamben, and realizing that controlling people's bodies and the biological politics is where our government has a certain amount of control over ourselves and also our decision-making process, which would be part of Foucault's governmentality itself, which are some of those techniques that the government uses to help direct our decision-making skills. And then also, just as we've talked about in a couple of panels here, the neoliberal themes in zombie media that we could sort of turn the mirror on ourselves and realize, well, we're all really, very centered on our technology and making consumer decisions based on what advertising is telling us we should buy. So those are all themes that I see in zombie media that are concerning. So just to provide a brief history of zombies, I know it's been talked about in other panels, but they do have colonial Haitian roots, and it is stemming from a syncretic religion. It was West African Vodun that was brought through the slave trade to the Caribbean, which then saw its combination with Catholicism, which ended up in what we would commonly know from the Caribbean and probably southern United States as voodoo. And so those roots are really important to understand, as zombies have now, our version of them is very much a biological crisis, a pandemic, but those roots of racism are still there, and certainly the fear of the other, which would be that xenophobic part of it as well. And then moving forward into their film version, again, so the first film that it appeared in, White Zombie, in the 1930s, this really had themes of women being more in touch with their, I would say, their animalistic side. So we definitely see sort of that male white privilege perspective in Hollywood. So women can be over-sexualized, and we have a fear of minority populations. And those are things that we are all intaking in all of our media, and it really takes a critical eye and a critical thought process to sort of separate out those themes and to question them. But again, in Hollywood, in my experience, there are a lot of older white men who are making those decisions, so they are coming from their particular perspective. We still see in the entertainment industry, I'm sure with Oscars So White, that whole movement, we are seeing people becoming more vocal about the fact that it's very difficult for women in that industry, it's very difficult for minority populations as well, and we very much still have to fight to have our voices and our stories told, so that it's not all from the one perspective of the white ruling male class. I'm missing things on here. Well, for whatever reason, it's not showing up in this version, and I'm not sure why, but we'll move on to the state of exception, which comes from Giorgio Agamben, and really that is and originally Carl Schmitt as well, the German philosopher, who basically used the state of exception to justify the Holocaust of the Jewish people from Nazi Germany. It's essentially that state rule takes over the normal rules in a state of crisis. So, for example, the German people were looking at using Nazi eugenics, trying to make a master race. So they basically created the Jewish population as an undesirable other that had to actually be excised from their population. And you could still, there are other scholars that will transfer that over to the slave trade and what we would now see here, in, not here, but this is Canada, but in the United States. Sorry, last time I presented, I was in the United States. But you would see that our urban minority communities and the way that our government policies have inadvertently created a surplus population that is disenfranchised. They are, ones that are targeted for mass incarceration and losing their right to vote, which is really removing political power and, in that sense, creating them as a dehumanized population, especially in comparison to middle-class social norms and values. So again, if we were to have a crisis large enough that a state of exception would come into being again, I would be very concerned about those urban minority populations and this, whether it's refugees or immigrants as well in those populations that would be most likely deemed expendable, and that's a very scary place to be. Again, I seem to be missing words on this that are in, I'm not sure why. Anyway, so biopolitics. This is something that both Michel Foucault and Giorgio Agamben write about, and it's as you can see from this, it's really deeming whose lives are worth living and whose are deemed expendable. And the government has a lot of control over our thought processes on that, and that governmentality comes from how we're socialized, and the government is part of that process. And our media plays a very, very large part in that as well, because obviously our entertainment, although we might all recognize it's entertainment, could also be very heavily influencing our thought processes on things. So moving on to governmentality, these are the techniques and rationalities through which people are governed. And I would argue that zombie media could certainly be seen as a cultural governmentality. Although it's not coming from our government, it's definitely coming from our media, which is really has, like I said, a lot of influence over our thought processes on things. And we should be concerned about those very vulnerable populations that we have if we were ever to enter a state of exception. And then xenophobia and zombies. I think that zombies and zombie media has become a way for us to voyeuristically explore our fear of the other. I think that's why, one of the reasons it's so popular. But it also plays on those, I would say, middle America fears of the other and infiltrating, whether it's an immigrant population or a refugee population or someone who doesn't subscribe to their very traditional norms and values. So that fear of the other is pretty prevalent in zombie media. And then neoliberal capitalism. I think that we could all feel like zombies a lot of the times. We unquestioningly probably watch commercials and feel like, oh yes, buying this handbag will really fill the empty hole I have in my life, when you know that if you were rationally to step back and realize that handbag has no bearing on any other decision I'm making in my life, but we are so socialized to want to be buying and having the newest iPhone or whatever it might be. And I think that there are a lot of people that talk about trying to disconnect from some of that technology and some of that consumerism. And it's very difficult when it's around you all the time. And again, that's the media that we really have to be critical of and trying to take what we are ingesting with a grain of salt. So that is my conversation for today, but thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you.